Welcome to the second of 3 video lectures on Homer's epic poem, the Iliad. In the first video lecture, I introduced Greek epic broadly, and then did a little bit of a deeper dive into books 1 and 3. In this second video lecture, we're going to do a deeper dive into books 6 and 16. We're going to take about 20 minutes with each. The video will be approximately 40 minutes long. The third video lecture still to come will look at books 22 and 24 of the Iliad. All right, let's dive in. Our learning objectives for today. So I want, at the end of this video lecture, I want you to be able to define and analyze the Greek words and what the idea of what the words mean, the concept behind them, of Xenia, Theos, and Moira. So you'll remember in the first video lecture I addressed 2 Greek terms, time and kleos, the different ideas of glory in Greek epic poetry. Today we're going to introduce 3 more, Xenia, Theos, and Moira. Xenia is a guest-host relationship. Theos is loosely a word for the gods, but we're going to talk about how it's very different than perhaps our English word for the gods. And then Moira, the idea of fate. All right, so more on that soon. I introduced some of Homer's similes in the first video lecture. I'm going to address a few more of those today and continue that discussion. And then after that, recalling key characters, events, and themes from books 6 and 16 of Homer's Iliad. Fix my sentence there. All right, so without further ado, let's jump in. All right, so in books 5 and 6, in books, we're skipping over books 4, 5, and the first 100 lines of book 6. And we're jumping in with just we're starting at line 110 in book 6. So let's take a look at these opening lines. We've got Hector opening the scene, but we quickly move to a conversation between 2 characters. 2 characters, at least in our course, we're meeting for the first time. Glaucus, who is one of the Trojan allies. He's technically not a Trojan himself because he's not from the city of Troy, but he's an ally of the Trojans and he's fighting on the side of the Trojans. And Diomedes. And Diomedes is a very important figure on the Greek side. He is one of the kings and he is one of the great Greek warriors. And what's happening is we are seeing them coming face to face in battle, but before they do, they stop and they have a conversation. And this conversation is interesting. They essentially, Glaucus asks Diomedes, tell me who you are. And this leads into a long story where he gives his background, his family history. And then Diomedes gives his, and then Glaucus gives his, right? And they come to realize that they actually cannot fight one another, because they have a guest-host relationship that they've inherited from their fathers. All right, so this is our first Greek term that I want to talk about and make sure you know by the end of the video lecture. The Greek idea of Xenia. X-E-N-I-A. Xenia. And Xenia is going to come up again and again in our study of Greek epic. Xenia refers, it's a very unique Greek idea, something we don't have in the 21st century, at least not in the same way. Xenia loosely can translate to hospitality. It can loosely translate to a guest-host relationship. There's not any one English word that really encompasses the idea of Xenia, so we need to talk about it for just a moment. In Greek culture, there is an obligation that's formed between a host and a guest. So if I am a traveler and I come to your home, you have an obligation to accept me into your home as a guest. And I have an obligation then to not abuse what you've offered me. I can't steal from you. I can't kill you in your sleep. I need to show that same respect and friendship in return. Once you've established Xenia between two families, it's hereditary. And it's then passed on through the generations. So Xenia is a really important concept, and we're going to get into the Xenia that Glaucus and Diomedes realize they share, but also just think back to the beginning of the Trojan War. The Trojan War started because Paris, Alexander Paris, stole Helena from Menelaus. And in doing so, he was a guest in his home, and in doing so, he committed a violation of Xenia. And the important thing to remember also about Xenia, the god of Xenia is Zeus himself. The most powerful, most important of all the gods is Zeus, and he's in charge of Xenia. This is not something you want to mess up, because you don't want to be on Zeus's bad side. All right, so these are two very important characters. Add them to the list of names that you need to remember for the class: Glaucus and Diomedes. So let's start here. So we get with the question, Lord Diomedes says to Glaucus before they fight, "Who are you? Are you a mortal? You look very strong." And essentially, I'm not going to fight with you if you're a god. Tell me if you're pretending to be a human, because gods do that. They've been doing it in some of the books we've skipped over. And Diomedes doesn't want anything to do with him if he's a god. I'm not going to fight with a god. And he goes in to talk about a fellow named Lycurgus, and I won't go into depth there, but that's, yeah, somebody who tried to fight with a god, and it does not end well for a human being to try to fight on the battlefield with any of the gods. And Glaucus then comes back, and he's got a really beautiful, so we're going to jump in. I want to point out this Homeric simile before we go on with the rest of their stories. It's a lovely, lovely comparison. The generations of men are like the growth and fall of leaves. The wind shakes some to earth, the forest sprouts new foliage, and springtime comes. So too, one human generation comes to be, another ends. So what are the two things being compared? Anytime you approach a simile, whether it's in Homer or elsewhere, or a metaphor, ask yourself, what are the two things being compared? The two things being compared are the generations of men, and they're being compared to the growth and fall of leaves. So just like new leaves every spring are born on a tree, and every fall they come down, so the generations of men pass on the same way. The generations of humans go on that same way. It's a lovely sentiment. And so Glaucus starts his story by saying, by illustrating this beautiful idea of humanity being like the falling leaves and the rebirth of leaves of trees. And a lovely, lovely little metaphor here. Okay, so now each one, this is where epic gets tough, because each one gives a big, long story of their family history. And we could go into that, and you can read that. But instead, what I'm going to do here, I'm not going to go into the stories, but what they realize when they come to the end of the story is that both their fathers were in a guest-host relationship. And we'll see that our translator, Emily Wilson, has translated a xenos, X-E-N-O-S. That's a person who's in a guest-host relationship. She's translated xenos, X-E-N-O-S, as guest friend. So she doesn't have a great word either. There's not just one word to explain this. But we hear Diomedes was glad to hear these words, and he says to Glaucus, "So you must be an old guest friend of mine through our forefathers." Not through their fathers directly, I'm sorry, through their forefathers. So several generations back, this hereditary relationship goes back. Oeneus once hosted noble Bellerophon inside his house and kept him as his guest for 20 days. That probably is also in the original Greek, is probably Xenos as well, X-E-N-O-S. They gave each other splendid gifts of friendship. That's part of it. You give each other gifts, and there's an elaborate, anyway. All right. So they don't fight each other. They jumped off their chariots, grasped each other's hands, and swore the oath. and they don't become friends. Now here's an interesting little bit that they add. Then Zeus robbed Glaucus of his wits. He traded his armor. They traded armor as a sign of their friendship, and he gave up gold armor for bronze. Gold armor worth 100 oxen for a set of bronze armor worth 9. I don't know what that means. I've always been fascinated with this little bit. I've had one professor in a class I was in mention, though, bronze armor is much more useful on the battlefield, even if it's not worth as much as gold armor. So I'm not sure it was, I don't know, it's not a good economic trade, but it might be a more better practical trade. Anyway, let's move on. All right, so this is Glaucus and Diomedes we've met. And we also, I thought we had in here, and I seem not to have highlighted it. Ah, yes, here, I did highlight it. We also get introduced to a third character that I need you to remember who he is. And he's very important. He's going to become much more important when we get to book 16 here in a few minutes. Sarpedon. And Glaucus is related to Sarpedon. They're cousins. And it's important to notice Zeus. So we get all these very difficult names to mention. But this young woman, Laodamia, whom devious Zeus seduced, that's hard to say, she had a son, godlike Sarpedon. So tuck that away for when we get to book 16. You're going to need to know who Sarpedon is. He's a very important character to book 16. But remember, too, he is a son of Zeus. That makes him a demigod, a very, very powerful individual. Okay, so now we slip into the second part of book 6 and back to, and this is a really tender and important part, we get to see Hector inside of Troy. So there's all this fighting happening outside of the Trojan walls, and Hector has gone back inside the Trojan walls. And we meet his mother, Hector's mother, generous Hecuba, came out to meet him. And she asks, why, my child, why did you leave the bitter fighting? Those Greeks, I curse their names, who are besieging our city must have worn you out. Your heart led you to come inside the walls and raise your hands to Zeus from our high citadel. So stay a while and let me get you wine sweetened with honey. Hecuba's name, remember, you heard her name in the first video lecture. I mentioned 4 Trojans at that point to remember from the first video lecture. The king, who is Priam, his wife, the queen, Hecuba, who we see here, and then their oldest son, Hector, who's just come in from the fighting, and of course we've got Paris, also known as Alexander, Paris Alexander, who is the one who stole Helen away. All right, so we see Hector encounter his mother. I'm going to scroll down, so there's a conversation that happens there. And then Hector, we see, interact with his younger brother, Paris. And these are not the only 2 brothers, I want to add, too. There are lots of children of Priam and Hecuba. These are the oldest and the second oldest, though, so they get the most attention. Now, Hector finds Paris in his inner chamber, and he's with Argive Helen. Argive is just an adjective. It just means the Spartan woman, Helen. And she was telling them to manufacture a splendid thread and cloth. Seeing his brother, Hector scolded him with words to bring him shame. And he says, why aren't you out there fighting with us? I've come back for a moment. I'm about to head back out. You need to head back out. And then this is a really interesting part. We get to hear Helen speak at this point. Remember, we heard Helen speak in book 3. She talked with Priam, the king, and she was pointing out who the different men were, who the different Greek men were on the battlefield. She pointed out Agamemnon and Odysseus, right, and who these warriors were. Well, here she speaks again. Listen to what she has to say about her husband, Paris. Brother-in-law, because talking to Hector, Hector's her brother-in-law. Brother-in-law, I am a source of fear and a source of evil strategy. A dog. She calls herself a dog. I wish that at the start, right when my mother gave birth to me, a cruel gust of wind had carried me to the mountains, or the waves of loud resounding sea and swept me off before all this could happen. But the gods ordained these troubles as they came to pass. And if you remember the lines from book 3, that sounds a lot like what Priam said to Helen as well. He said, I don't blame you, dear child. I blame the gods. They're the ones who have decided to do this. Now keep in mind, We said Sarpedon is a child of Zeus. So is Helen. So she also is in that same category, that same demigod category. And that's why she's the most beautiful woman on earth. That's her special gift. Whether or not it's a gift, as it turns out, we can argue, though. And then listen to what she says about her husband, about Paris. This man has no good sense, no self-control, and no capacity to change. One day he surely will receive his retribution, right? That's interesting. She, and I think one of the questions we keep coming back to with Helen, did she go willingly? How does she feel about Paris? How does she feel about Menelaus? How does she see the situation? And we don't hear her talk very often in the Iliad. We don't get a lot of insight into what she's thinking, but here we get a little bit. I love the end of this quote, too. She goes back to this idea the gods have made us who we are. This is a wonderful little meta-theatrical moment. Zeus set an evil lot upon us all to make us topics of a singer's tale for people in the future still unborn. Who are the people in the future still unborn, who are going to listen to this song? You and me, right? The original Greek audience, of course, who heard the bards singing this, but us. I just love this moment of like Zeus wanted us to have a good story, so he gave us the Iliad, right? It's just a great little moment. I think where the bard speaks directly to us and makes us remember that we're sitting here listening to this song be sung, this long song. Next, Hector goes off. So he's gone to see his mother, he goes to see his brother, and then he goes to see his wife. And I haven't introduced her yet, but she is an extremely important character to Greek myth, and she is Andromache. And they have a young baby boy together, Andromache. And Andromache also is not Trojan. She married into the royal family. And he comes and he finds he sees the baby. The baby's name is Astyanax. Again, the baby gets two names, Astyanax and Scamandrius. So just like all the Greeks, there's just you have to wrestle with the multiple names when we're dealing with Greek epic. Trojans and Greeks, they all get multiple names. And I love this part. This is so tender. This is probably the most tender moment in the Iliad. Now Hector saw his child and smiled at him in silence, saying nothing. Andromache stood next to him in tears, grasping his hand, and spoke to him and said, "What are you doing, Hector, you strange man? Your will to fight will kill you. Do you feel no pity for your little baby son?" She's saying, why are you going to go back out and fight? You might die and leave us, right? She says, "Soon I shall be your widow. Soon the Greeks, all of them rushing at you all at once, will kill you." Right? And then she goes on, and I'm gonna just kind of skim through a little bit of this, right? But this is one of the most important passages in all of the Iliad. Her case, don't go back out and fight. She says, "I had 7 brothers, and all of them went to Hades in one day. Achilles killed them all." Right? Her mother is dead. Her father is dead. And then we get to this bit here at line 545. "Hector, you are my father and mother. You are my brother, and the vigorous man whose bed I share. Please think of me. Have pity, and stay here on the wall." Remember, Troy is surrounded by a big wall, and it was made by Poseidon and Apollo. It can't be taken down by humans. This wall will defend them, right? Line up the troops beside the wild fig tree. Place the enemy the place the enemy might scale the wall and strike the town of Troy, right? Don't go out and fight. Use our defenses to do it. But he won't. He says, "Woman, I care about all these things too, but I feel overwhelming shame in front of the Trojan women in their trailing dresses and Trojan men if I shrink back from war as if I were a coward. You see, my heart and mind know this for sure, that there will be a day when holy Troy will be destroyed, and Priam," that's his father, the king, "Lord of the Ashwood spear, and all our people. But no one matters more to me than you. No pain that anyone in Troy will suffer, not even Hecuba," that's his mother, "or High King Priam, not even all my many noble brothers who will be slaughtered by our enemies and fall amid the dust in days to come. No pain of theirs affects me more than yours." Right? And one day some bronze-armed Greek will capture you, and you will weep, deprived of all your freedom. Hector knows that when the Trojan War comes to an end, just like the audience hearing this poem, just like us reading it, Troy will lose. And Hector seems to know that that's going to happen. But yet he is still going to go out and fight, because that's what his sense of honor calls on him to do. And one last tender moment from book 6 before we move to book 16. Then noble Hector reached toward his son. The baby wailed and wiggled back to snuggle into his well-groomed nurse's lap and dress. The child was scared by how his father looked, shocked at the terrifying horsehair plume that nodded at the top part of his helmet. So Hector still has his helmet on. He reaches down to touch the baby, and the baby is, don't know, what are you? He doesn't recognize his father in his suit of armor, his warrior, with his helmet with the big plume of horsehair on it, and he's scared of him, right? His loving father and his mother laughed. Hector immediately took off his helmet and put it on the ground. It glittered brightly. Then glorious Hector kissed his darling son and took him in his arms to rock and cuddle, and prayed to Zeus. He can take his helmet off for a moment, but not permanently. He cannot deny the warrior code that says he has to go out beyond the walls and fight with the Greeks. Very, very tender moment, and especially a tender moment remembering this is the Greeks telling the story. And Homer, what makes the Iliad beautiful is that Homer does not villainize the enemy, the Trojans. He humanizes them. And that's what makes the Iliad such powerful, powerful literature, is that we feel affection on both sides, and therefore we feel pain on both sides when they war with one another. Right? We'll go further with that. There's more on that. Let's jump down to book 16. We are skipping, and I've included some quick notes. Book 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Book 9 is actually in our textbook, but I'm still going to skip it just for the sake of moving our own class along. And we are also skipping the first 400 lines of book 16. As well. But it is important to note that what happens in those first 400 lines, there's another character I haven't talked about yet, but he is absolutely one of those important Greek characters. You need to know his name, Patroclus. And Patroclus is the best friend of Achilles. And remember, Achilles has been sitting out the war. And in these books that we're skipping over, the Trojans have been winning. Without Achilles, Achilles refuses to fight. Remember, he's mad at Agamemnon, and he will not fight for Agamemnon, right? In book 9, the book that's in our textbook but that we're skipping, we see Odysseus and Diomedes and and I'm forgetting his name, a third fellow who is a father-like figure. Oh shoot, I can't remember his name. I'm sorry. They come in book 9. And they attempt to convince Achilles to return to the war. He will not do it. Him and Patroclus and all of Achilles' men are sitting out the war until and here's the reason though too. Remember that Thetis, mother to Achilles, went to Zeus at the end of book 1, and we kind of gloss over that part very quickly. I didn't go into depth at the end of book 1, but Thetis got Zeus to agree to bring glory to Achilles. And this is all part of Zeus's plan. He's going to let the Greeks lose for a very long time. Now, because fate has ordained that the Greeks will win, Zeus can't change that. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. Zeus can't change fate, but he can make it very, very hard on the Greeks and the Trojans, right? And he's going to. And in fact, that's the same thing we're going to see when we get to the Odyssey. Poseidon, the sea god, despises Odysseus. And he would like to kill Odysseus, but he can't, because the fates have said that Odysseus gets to go home when we get to the Odyssey. The gods cannot control everything. They have to obey fate. All right, so before we jump into book 16, that's our other 2 words. I introduced Xenia earlier, so we have a list of 5 words total that we've learned in Greek so far, or we will here in just a moment. We learned time and kleos in video lecture 1. I've already talked about Xenia, and I want to introduce 2 other concepts, the word theos, T-H-E-O-S, it's where we get our English word theology, and the easiest translation in English is the gods, But what I want to distinguish here is the gods are not like a Christian notion of a god. They are not all powerful. They cannot upend fate. They have to obey fate. And it's not quite clear if they have to obey it or if they choose to obey it. But in a way, it doesn't matter because they always obey fate. And then the fifth Greek word that I need everyone to learn, Moira. Theos is Theos. Moira, M-O-I-R-A. Moira. And that's fate. And that's this all-encompassing predestined lot that you have in life. And it can't be changed. The gods cannot change your Moira or your fate. Real quick tangent before I jump into book 16. The myth is, so all humans have one fate, one lot in life that they've been given. We don't get to know what it is, but it's there, and the gods cannot change it. Except for one mortal person has two Moiras, and that's Achilles. Achilles has two, and he has to choose which one he wants. And the two choices he's going to get are he can choose to lead a long, boring life, or he can lead a short life filled with chaos and time. And he has to choose which one he wants. All right, more on that later. Let's jump into book 16. I mentioned, as we were studying book 6, make sure you remember the names Sarpedon and Glaucus, right? Glaucus is the man we saw in book 6 fighting with Diomedes. All right, Sarpedon shows up here, and we're doing these we've skipped 400 lines in book 16. And here's the key thing to know. So Patroclus has convinced Achilles to let him wear his armor and go out and rally the troops in his armor. And at first, everyone thinks it's Achilles for a bit. And even when they realize it's Patroclus in Achilles' armor, it's still enough to rally the Greeks, and it's enough to frighten the Trojans. And it's enough to turn the tide of war for a time in favor of the Greeks again. Because all those other books that we skipped over, the Trojans are winning. Over and over again, they keep pushing the Greeks back closer and closer to their camp. And soon they'll be able to destroy them. So Patroclus says, hey, let me wear your armor, Achilles, and I'll just go. I know you won't fight. I know you refuse to fight. Your mother's told you not to go out and fight. You're not supposed to go out and fight, or you're not willing to because of your pride. But let me go out there and let me wear your armor. And Achilles is like, yeah, he lets him do it. He makes him promise, though, not to go too far. Don't go all the way to the walls of Troy. If only Patroclus would have listened. But all right, we'll get there. We'll get there. So we start off with Sarpedon. And this is really important, this idea of Moira and the fact that the gods can't change things. So Sarpedon is out there, and he's trying to rally up the Trojans. He's like, why is Patroclus able to beat us? And Zeus looks down, and he sees his son, Sarpedon, his mortal son, the demigod, half-god Sarpedon, and he says to Hera, at the sight of the crooked-minded Kronos, at the sight, the son of the crooked-minded Kronos, lots of extra words just to say Zeus, Zeus spoke up and told his wife and sister Hera. Yeah, I love that. His wife and sister. I'm sure you knew that part of the myth, right? Isn't that? I don't think the Greeks would have thought it was all that weird. It's weird for humans, but the gods do it all the time. Zeus spoke up and told his wife and sister Hera, "This is extremely difficult for me. The man, or the human, right, that I love the most of all humankind, my son Sarpedon, is assigned to die. It's been fated, and the gods, the Theos characters, they get to know what fate is. The humans don't. And he knows that his son is fated to die in this battle at the hands of Patroclus. And he says, I'm of two minds, wondering if I ought to lift him up alive and take him from the battlefield, the source of tears, and carry him away. So should I defy Moira and save this son that I love, or let him be killed beneath Patroclus' hands?" And Hera's like, what? And Hera never likes any of Zeus's illegitimate children, of course. So she's not a fan of Sarpedon, or if you know the story of Hercules, she hates Hercules, right? Any of his children that he has with other women, whether they're human women or other goddesses, Hera's always angry about. She says, "What have you said? You want to free from painful death a mortal whose lot was dealt out long ago?" And lot is translated in the Greek. If you were to go back to the original Greek, that would be whose Moira was dealt out long ago. Then do it. But none of us Olympians supports you. So it's not quite clear if the gods can go against Moira or not, but they just never do. And even here, Zeus obeys. He backs down and he rains down drops of blood to earth to glorify the son he loves, Sarpedon, who would be killed upon the fertile field of Troy, far from his homeland, by Patroclus. So we get them battling. So we get the image of heaven, and then we zoom down to the battlefield, and Patroclus, as Moira dictates, kills him. And we get a lovely, another lovely, I guess lovely is the wrong word, a rather bloody and violent Homeric simile here. As when a lion leaps into a herd of ambling cattle and among them kills a brave red bull who groans and grieves and dies clutched in the lion's jaws. Just so, Sarpedon, leader of the Lycian warriors with shields, the Lycians are the allies of Troy, so they're not Trojan, but they're fighting on the same side alongside the Trojans, defeated by Patroclus, struggled hard against his death. Right? So anytime we come up to a metaphor, whether it's Homer or elsewhere, we ask ourselves, what are the two things being compared? So a lion, actually, and I'd say there's two sets of things being compared. So the lion is being compared to Patroclus, and the more pressing one is a brave red bull, a dying brave red bull, and is being compared to Sarpedon, right? And then the second thing, what's the significance of the comparison? Bulls are tough and strong and powerful, and even when they die with nobility, and that's the significance of the metaphor. Glaucus, who we met in book 6, remember he's the one who wouldn't fight with Diomedes because they had had a guest host relationship, the Xenia, but shared between them through their forefathers. Glaucus comes and remember they're part of that same family tree. That's why we got introduced to Sarpedon very briefly in book 6 while he was still alive. And here's Glaucus on Sarpedon. The best man in the world is dead. Sarpedon, son of Zeus. That god did not protect his child. And Glaucus can't know why, but he knows Zeus, even the son of Zeus, can be killed. He doesn't know that it's because of the Moira, because of the fate, but all the same, he realizes even a son of Zeus can be killed. And yes, I highlighted here too, we get some mentions of Aeneas. He's another character tuck away. You need to know who Aeneas is. He has a relatively small part in the Iliad, and he's not in the Odyssey at all, but he has an extremely important part later in Greek myth, so tuck that name away too. Aeneas. Aeneas is going to be one of the few survivors of the Trojan War on the Trojan side, and he's going to sail to Italy and found Rome. He is the founder of Rome. But that's a whole other set of myths, so we'll get to that later in the semester. At these words, desperate grief engulfed the Trojans, and they could not bear it. Although he was a foreigner, Sarpedon had been the guardian of Troy, commanding so many troops to fight in Troy's defense, while he himself fought hardest of them all. And so they rush back, and there's this huge battle that takes place over Sarpedon's body, to get his armor and to get the body and make sure it's taken back and given a proper funeral. In a minute, Zeus is actually going to come pick up the body and return it to his homeland for the proper burial. Burial is very important in Greek culture. People have to be buried appropriately, with all the proper ritual so that they can go into the underworld. We're going to meet a character later, a character who is not buried properly. We're going to meet a couple of them, actually. One in the Odyssey, and then later in one of the plays that we're going to read. And we're going to see them wandering as ghosts. And it's not very pleasant to wander the earth as a ghost. It's much better to be sent to the underworld. Anyway, we'll get there. So here we see with unearthly screams the two sides met around the body of the dead Sarpedon. Their weapons clashed and clanged, and Zeus spread out sinister night. People die as they're battling, and Zeus actually decides that this will not be an easy fight for Sarpedon. He wants a lot of it builds up the kleos, the fame that outlast Sarpedon. We're talking about Sarpedon some 3,000 years later. That's his Kleos, and Zeus wants to make sure he gets it. So there's going to be this huge battle for the body, this huge battle for the armor. And Patroclus on one side leading it, and we're going to see Hector on the other. And Glaucus, all these characters coming together, battling over the armor and the body. And also some more references. Aeneas is part of this as well, which is, Aeneas is just a seedling being planted right now for later myths. And he is, we're going to read the Aeneid a little bit later in the semester, at least we're going to read the first 4 books of the Aeneid later in the semester. And Aeneas is... it's called the Aeneid because it's the story of Aeneas, the same way the Odyssey is the story of Odysseus. All right, so Aeneas, very important character. We'll get back to him, though. Let's jump down here. We get this great passage here. Zeus says... Zeus decided that fine Patroclus, comrade of Achilles, should drive the Trojans back to the city and take many lives. Zeus wants this to be a violent fight. And he sends down Phoebus. Remember, Phoebus is another name for Apollo. And this is Zeus talking. Remove Sarpedon far from all the weapons and clean the storm-black blood away from him. Wash him with streams of water. And he gets taken back to his homeland in Lycia. And his brothers, his family, and his neighbors can mourn him with a funeral mound and gravestone, which is the prize of honor due the dead. So Sarpedon now has finally been taken back. Apollo makes sure that happens. And then next, now it's time for the rest of Zeus's plan. He didn't get exactly what he wanted in the first part. He had to give up Sarpedon, but now he gets the rest, and that is the Patroclus. His Moira is that he is going to die here, and this is what's going to push forward the rest of the Iliad. So let's look at how we lose Patroclus. Look what Apollo does. And Apollo, keep in mind, he, along with Poseidon, built the walls of Troy. He is on the side of the Trojans. Goddesses like Athena and Hera, they're on the side of the Greeks. Aphrodite, remember how she saves Paris? She's on the side of the Trojans. So the gods have taken their sides. They can't change who wins, but they sure can get involved and make it difficult for the winners to win and make the suffering of the losers even harsher, right? So here comes Apollo, and he urges Hector back to the fight. But come now. He's pretending he's in the shape of a human. He looks like an uncle to Hector named Asius. And he says to him, but come now, drive your horses towards Patroclus. Maybe you will kill him. You may be granted victory by Apollo. And he will be. He will win this fight. And here's why he wins the fight. It's not a fair fight. It's never a fair fight if there's a god who's going to make sure that it happens the way it does. In the cutthroat combat amid the chaos of the battlefield, Phoebus Apollo came to meet Patroclus. The human failed to see the eerie god, cloaked in thick mist. We always get this mist throughout the Iliad. Humans can't usually see the gods, right? They're always cloaked in mist. Apollo stood behind Patroclus, and with one flat palm he patted his back and sturdy shoulders so his eyes swiveled. A swift pat from Apollo is going to hurt, right? Then Apollo nudged his helmet off. It clattered underneath the horse's hooves, right? He takes off Patroclus's helmet. Then the big, long, thick, and sturdy spear Patroclus held in his hands was shattered all to pieces. And then his fine fringed shield and sword belt slipped and fell. He's literally stripping of the armor. And remember, this is Achilles' armor. He's stripping it off of him. It's just all falling. And confusion seized that's Patroclus's mind. His splendid body undone, he stood stock still in bafflement. And then a sharp spear struck him from behind between the shoulders on his back. Now, that didn't kill him yet, though. That didn't kill him yet. So he takes off running. He's lost the armor. He's been injured. Takes off running. But Hector saw brave Patroclus in retreat and wounded. He muscled through the crowd, got near Patroclus, and speared him underneath the ribs, and drove the bronze point through his body. With a thud, he fell. The army of the Greeks lamented. And here's one last Homeric simile for us today. Just as a lion bests a tireless boar, when on the mountainside they fight together, bow-spirited, majestic warriors, because both want to drink from a small stream. The boar pants hard, defeated by the lion. So Hector, son of Priam, standing close, stabbed with his spear, and took away the life of brave Patroclus. What are the two things being compared? Hector is being compared to a lion. So that's the first, and this one is a double metaphor for us. And then we get Patroclus compared to a boar. Both great beasts, but the lion wins. All right, so we get to the end of book 16 here, and the Greeks on the battlefield see what's happened to Patroclus. Achilles thinks he's still alive, though, at least for now. We're going to see the aftermath now in video lecture number 3, when Achilles finds out that Hector has killed his best friend. And we come to the climax at that point of the Iliad. All right, thanks, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the video lecture.